Here is an update on the current money printing and liquidity conditions in the United States. At the most recent FOMC meeting, the Fed said that it will begin slowing down its balance sheet runoff process starting next month, but according to the data, it looks like they may have already begun doing so. As you know, I have been tracking the Fed's balance sheet reports to try and determine when they are ending quantitative tightening or beginning quantitative easing. My most recent video update was from the February 27th report, but what has happened since? In the last two reports, we have seen a sharp drop of the Reserve Bank credit on March 6th, but it turned positive on March 13th. This is important because it signals the first increase in the Fed's total balance sheet since February 13th. And if this continues, it may be an early sign of QE returning or a QT pause. In regards to marketable Treasury securities, on March 6th, we saw one of the largest weekly increases since January. But then they slightly reduced them the following week on March 13th. This may just be a sign of portfolio rebalancing, but it's still great to see them purchasing large amounts of marketable Treasury securities. We saw a huge decrease in mortgage-backed securities on March 6th, which told us that QT was still strongly active. But on March 13th, we saw a pause. This lines up with what the Fed said in their most recent Fed meeting and that they are stalling QT. For reverse repo agreements, we saw a huge increase on March 6th, which indicates that the Fed was soaking up liquidity from the markets. Then the following week, the Fed started giving that liquidity back to the markets. This is creating liquidity volatility, and they could just be testing the waters in case they decide to funnel more liquidity back into the markets. And for other liabilities, we saw a small decrease, which isn't too significant, but it slightly adds to the tightening signal. To sum it up, the Fed is not committed to quantitative easing yet. However, quantitative tightening is weakening. This is being communicated to us through the less aggressive tightening, the short pauses in the balance sheet runoff, and the overall volatility in the week-to-week data, which is telling us that this is a transition phase between QT and QE. The most likely scenario is that the Fed is testing liquidity conditions and keeping conditions tight enough to control inflation, but they're no longer fully committed to deep QT. We are currently in a neutral zone where the Fed is ready to pivot in either direction depending on market stability and inflation. You can screenshot this video now and zoom in on this chart to get a better idea of what I'm saying. For more updates on the current state of money printing in the US, make sure to give me a follow.